The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted our life in so many ways. Even for me, I just started to talk in physical conferences in the end of the year of 2019, and all the physical conference that came after has been canceled. And in this situation in life, you maybe can be sad, but from my perspective for life, life are so short, and we really don't have time to be sad. And because of that, I always think about how to create a good situations from a bad ones. And this is exactly what I've done when the corona pandemic has started. In the beginning of the corona pandemic, we had a lot more time to spend at home. And in the first few days, I was rearranged my apartment, moved everything, changed everything, opened my sofa to a bed that sometimes I can sleep in my living room, the aquarium that didn't work for 5 years. I put some water and some fishes, and everything to create a good mood to stay at home. And then came the first weekend that we cannot go out anywhere. And I thought to myself, what I will do with all this free time in this weekend? And I remember that several years ago, I created a pure CSS game, which is called Kill the Birds, that so many web developers all around the world loved it very much. But I thought to myself that in the last several years, I learned so many new tricks in CSS that now I can create a lot better one. But I needed an idea of what it will be about. And it was one of the most easiest ideas that I had in my life. Because if we are now living in the coronavirus pandemic time, why not to create the coronavirus game? And this is exactly what I've done. I sat in the weekend and I created this pure CSS game that you're seeing right now, that everything is done only while using CSS and HTML. Yes, for the CSS part, I'm using CSS preprocessor like Sass. And even for the HTML part, I'm using an HTML preprocessor. But all the logic of the game that you are seeing right now, like when I'm clicking on the I button and it opens a pop-up, the logic of the opening and the closing of the pop-up is done. I'm using only CSS and HTML. And when I will click the Save the World button, the play button of the game, it will hide the game menu navigation and will open the game frame itself. Even that logic is done only while using CSS and HTML. And when I will click on some coronavirus, they will disappear, and the score of the game will go up. Even that logic is done only while using CSS and HTML. And what about the countdown? No, really? Even the countdown is built only while using CSS. But before you're writing any single line of code in your own project, you need to think about something that inspires you. And I don't know why, I remember an old code pen that was created on painting on Canvas HTML with this creature that reminds me a little bit the coronavirus creature. This was my starting point to create my own coronavirus creature. And I needed to give a name for the game and to think about how to design the main navigation. And I don't know why I remember the old Chicken Invaders game. I took the Invaders word from it and some design ideas on how to create and design the navigation bar. And when you're thinking about inspiration, it's always to take other older ideas and to create from them something else, something new. And the first thing that I wanted to create in my game is first to create the coronavirus creatures. And it's nice to see that this was my inspiration, and in the end, the coronavirus creature was looking a lot more different. And I love it because this is more my corona creature. And then I started to create the HTML of the coronavirus creature. And for me, the HTML is very important. It's not just to take HTML element and throw them to an HTML document. No, it's an object of HTML, and it needs to be very precise. Then I created this label HTML element with the class of coronavirus, and I put it inside input type radio. And you may ask why I'm using here label HTML element, and why there is an input type radio inside. This is part of the logic that we will talk about it a little bit later. But all the visual part of the virus that you are seeing right now are starting in this div class body inside the coronavirus creature. We have the body, inside we have those 12 hairs, and of course, it's both eyes. But from the beginning, I saw that I have a lot of repetition in my HTML code. like to create those 12 hairs HTML element. And in the real game, I have 100 coronavirus creatures, and I didn't want to copy-paste them one by one. And I needed a way to solve this problem. And in my first time in my life, I'm using here an HTML preprocessor, which is called Pug, that gives you the possibility to do repetitions and variables and to create the HTML part in a smarter way. And of course, for the CSS part, I'm using the CSS preprocessor of Sass that I'm using, I think, in the last 10 years for every one of my projects. And now, instead of doing this repetition of all those classes between R1 until R12, I can use Pug with variables and while loop and to create dynamically the HTML in a more smarter way. But when you're working in Pug, you cannot write half Pug and half HTML. You need to write everything in Pug. Yes, it's being compiled to regular HTML. And it's meaning that I needed to update all my projects to the new way that Pug is being written. And yes, you need to learn it, and yes, you need to get used to it. But all this project, I was created in 2 days in the weekend, and I was learning Pug meanwhile I was creating this project. Because of that, everyone can learn Pug. It's really not so hard. And then I wanted to start to create all the visual part of the coronavirus creature. I started with the body. I gave it position relative. Why position relative? Because all the inner parts need to be all around its body. And I gave its body display block, width and height of 100 pixels, background color black, and to get the circle shape, I just gave it border radius of 50%. To create all of the eyes and to select the classes, if you remember, I1 and I2, and I want to select them together, I'm using here the attribute selector with the star character. This is selecting me all the classes that have the I word inside. And I gave them width and height, a little bit different, background color white, and again, border radius of 50%. Because the width and the height are a little bit different, it's getting the egg shapes that is nice to get. To locate those eyes, I gave both of them position absolute from the top 25%, the first eye, I1, from the left 25%, and the right eye from the right, and a little bit rotate Z with the transform property inside. To create the inner part of the eyes without adding another HTML element, I'm just using here the before pseudo element, and in the same way, just give it width and height, background color black, and border radius of 50%. And if you are looking what I created until now, it's just circles, circles, and circles. To create the hairs of the coronavirus creature, every one of the hairs, I needed to select all the classes, if you remember, between R1 until R12. Again, I'm using here the attribute selector with the star character, and I'm creating the hair from 2 boxes. I'm using here the before and after pseudo element. The root of the hair is the after pseudo element, and it's 1 box that I'm putting in the bottom, and the crown of the hair is another box that I'm putting up above. To create a circle shape, how I'm doing it, just giving it border radius of 50%. To locate all those 12 hairs around the coronavirus creature, I first gave them position absolute and locate all of them in the middle, in the center of the coronavirus creature. And now, one by one, I want to put them around the coronavirus creature. How I'm doing it? The first hair, getting the transform property with a rotate Z value of 0 degrees, that doesn't do anything, and then translate the Y value with a value of minus 65 pixels, that taking the hair from the center to the top. But the hair too now need to be top, but little bit to the right. How I'm doing it? Hair 2 will get now the transform property, but now with a rotate Z value of 30 degrees, and only then the translate to Y value with a value minus 65 pixels. This way, the hair is going from top, but little bit to the right. And if you didn't know until now, the order in the value of the transform property are very important because they are affecting each other. And in this way, I just located all the corona hairs around the coronavirus creature. As you can see, different rotate Z value and the same translate Y value. But as you can see here, we have a lot of repetition. And we as the web developers don't love to create repetition. How can we do it in another way? Because I'm working with CSS preprocessors, in Sass, we can create the for loop. And this is exactly what I'm doing. First, I'm creating a Sass variable with the name of start position, and I give it a value of 0 degrees. Then I'm creating this Sass for loop that getting another Sass variable with the name of I that is going dynamically between 1 to 12. And if every one of the iteration, this creating me dynamically the CSS selector. The Sass variable of start position is getting bigger in every one of the iteration by 30 degrees. And I'm just putting this Sass variable inside the rotate z value. And in this way, I just now created you this CSS. Nice, easy. But I wanted this creature to feel a lot more alive, and I wanted to edit some animations. And I had a problem. I want to create that all the hairs are moving. And because every one of them have a different transform value, I needed to create 12 different animations for every one of the hairs. And I didn't want to write them one by one. Because of that, I just created them dynamically with the same for loop, that creating me dynamically 12 different animations. And I wanted to create the effect that the hairs are moving in different timeline. To do that, it's very easy. You can use the animation delay property. But the problem, if you are using positive value, let's say that the first hair getting an animation delay of 60 milliseconds, the second one 120, and the third one, let's say 180, when you will load the page, it will first be stuck, and only after those milliseconds it will start to move. And you don't want this effect. To do it in another way, instead of using positive values, use negative values. The first hair is getting minus 60 milliseconds, the second one minus 120, the third one minus 180, and so on and so on. And this is mean that animation is act like it's already started even before the page was loaded. And in this way, you are having the effect that the hairs are moving in different timeline. But I wanted this creature to feel a lot more alive, and I wanted to add some animation for the eyes. I just added animation for the inner part of the eyes. I wanted they will move a little bit. And I wanted to create the effect that the eyes are getting closed. To do that, I'm using here the second pseudo-element of every one of the eye, the after pseudo-element. And it's like a box. It has a width of 100%, height of 0 pixel, you don't see it, and background color black. But in the animation of it, of this after pseudo-element, every 5 seconds of the animation, only in the last half second, I'm giving it a height of 100%. And in this way, the eyes are getting closed. But enough talking about this creature. Now let's talk about the real magic of this pure CSS game. The first thing that you need to understand how you want to separate all the frames that we have in our own game. To do that, we will take a look again on the game itself. Let's take a look on the game. And as you can see, the first frame that we can see, this is the game menu frame. And this is one frame that we need to represent in our HTML document. The second one is when I will click on the How to Play button, it will open a pop-up. And this is another frame, type of pop-up, that we're putting up above. And yes, we can put frame above other frames. The third frame, in the same way, when I will click on the OMI, it will open another pop-up. And this is our third frame that we have in our own game, that we need to represent in the HTML. The last frame is when I will click the Save the World button, it will hide the game menu frame, and it will open the game frame itself, where we are playing the game itself. And this is our last 4 frame that we need to represent in our HTML code. How I'm representing them? In a very easy way. I'm just creating 4 separated section HTML elements. And as you can see by the class name and by the ID name, the first one is the game menu frame. The second one is the game frame itself. The third one is the pop-up of Who Am I? And the last one is the pop-up of the How to Play. But when I'm loading the game, I want to see only the game menu frame. I don't want to see all the other frames. How I'm hiding all the other frames in a very easy way that everyone knows. I'm just giving all the other frames display none, and in this way, I'm only seeing the game menu frame. But now, we need to start to create some magics in CSS, kind of magics. We need to create some flags that will tell us if something is open or something is closed. How I can create flags without using any JavaScript? If you ever thought about input element of checkbox, checkboxes, they are like flags. Unchecked, false. Checked, true. And this is exactly what I'm adding in the beginning of the HTML document. In the beginning of the HTML document, I'm adding 3 input with type of checkbox. Every one of them is doing a specific thing. Every one of them have a specific ID name. And the first one with the ID of toggle game, if it's unchecked, this is mean that I want to see the game menu frame, but I want to hide the game frame itself. If it's checked, it means that I want to see the game frame, but I want to hide the game menu frame. The 2 other are even more simple to understand. The second checkbox that has the ID name of how to play pop-up, if it's unchecked, don't show me the pop-up, and if it's checked, please show me the pop-up. And the third one with the ID of who am I pop-up, if it's unchecked, don't show me the pop-up. And if you are checked, please show me the pop-up. But those are just checkboxes that I'm putting in the beginning of the HTML document. They are not doing anything. I gave them opacity of 0, position absolute, top minus something, and you cannot click on them. And now, we need a way to trigger those checkboxes without clicking on them specific. How can we do it? For that, we have a very old feature that exists in the beginning of the HTML, I think. The button that you saw in the game navigation, these buttons are not button HTML element. Instead, I'm using here label HTML element. And label HTML element can trigger any input that you want. You just need to use the for attribute that can be connected to any input checkbox that you want, or any input at all. And here you can see that this label button, Save the World, is being connected to the ID name of this checkbox. You see toggle game, toggle game. This is for attribute, and this is the ID name. They are connected. And this means that if I'm clicking on the Save the World label button, it will trigger this checkbox, and it will change its status from unchecked to checked. If you will click it again, it will change again from checked and unchecked. And as many times you will click on it, the same way for the 2 other label buttons, let's say the OMI, for example. If I will click this label, it is connected with the for attribute to the checkbox of the OMI pop-up, this one, and it will change the status from unchecked to checked. You will click it again, from checked to unchecked. But this is only changing those statuses of those checkboxes. And now we need to use the status of those checkboxes to show or hide other frames of the games. And to do that, I'm using here 2 special CSS features. The first feature is the check pseudo class. I can see if there is a specific checkbox that is in status of checked with the check pseudo class. And if I see that there is a specific checkbox in status of checked, I can go to any sibling element that come after, and I can give it display block, display none, and in this way, I can show or hide other frames of the game. And this is exactly what I'm doing in my real game. For example, when I'm clicking on the How to Play label button, it will trigger the checkbox that has the ID name of How to Play pop-up. And now this selector is starting to work, because this selector is working only when this checkbox is in check status. And if this checkbox with the ID of How to Play pop-up is in status of checked, go to the sibling element that has the ID of How to Play, and this is the real pop-up, and just give it display block. And in this way, I'm just opening this pop-up. But now you need to ask yourself another question. How I'm closing this pop-up? And it's really the same thing I'm doing here. When this pop-up is open, this means that this checkbox is in status of checked. And now I need to change the status of checked to unchecked. How I'm doing it, the X button and the close button in this specific pop-up are again label HTML elements. They are not buttons, they are label HTML elements that are being connected with the for attribute to the same checkbox. And if you will click the X button or the close button, it will trigger this checkbox. It will change the status from checked to unchecked. This selector will stop to work, and the pop-up will be closed. Nice. But now you need to ask yourself another question. What is happening when I'm clicking the Save the World button? When I'm clicking the Save the World button, I need to do 2 operations instead of 1. First, I need to hide the game menu navigation, and then I need to open the game frame itself. How can I do 2 operations instead of 1? And again, it's really the same thing. I can see if there is a checkbox with the ID name of toggle game, and if you are in status of checked, go to the sibling element that has the class of game menu frame and give it display none. This way I'm just hiding the game menu frame. And after that, go to the sibling element of the game frame and give it display block. And in this way, you can do as many operations that you want with the same checkbox. This way of written is written, of course, with Sass, but you can write it in two separated CSS selectors, but it's a lot more readable to do it with Sass. Nice. Now let's jump for one of the most amazing tricks. And actually, we have here two tricks that we need to talk about them. When I'm clicking those coronavirus creatures, they are being disappeared from the screen. This is the first trick. The second one is that I need to count all those viruses that I was clicking on them and they are being vanished from the screen. Let's start with the first trick. If you remember in the beginning, I told you that every coronavirus creature is a label HTML element with the class of coronavirus, but I told you also that all the visual part of the virus are inside the body. We have the body, and inside we have the eyes and the hairs. And what I'm doing in the game, I'm doing animation on the label HTML element. I'm telling it to move around the screen. And because it's wrapping all the visual part, when you are clicking on the visual part of the virus, it's like you are clicking on the label HTML element. And the magic here, that if you are putting an input inside the label HTML element, you don't even need the for attribute and the ID. You can just put it inside and it will work. This means that I'm clicking on the coronavirus creature. It's like I'm clicking on the label. It will automatically trigger the input type radio that we have inside. This input type radio will change the status from unchecked to checked. And now we need to use this status because this status is telling us that the virus is being dead. And now we need to hide all the visual part of the virus. To do that, I'm just using the selector of input type radio. If you're in status of checked, go to the sibling element with the class of body. This is all the visual part of the virus. And just give it opacity of 0. And in this way, when you are clicking those viruses, they are being disappeared from the screen. Nice. But now, how I'm counting all those dead viruses, how I'm creating the CSS score. To do that, I'm using CSS counter feature. This feature exists almost from the beginning. I don't know. Even I think Internet Explorer X is supporting it. And how are you declaring a CSS counter? In order to it to work correctly, it needs to be declared before all the input type radio that you have in your own game. The easiest place to put it is on the body HTML element. On the body HTML element, I'm using the property of counter reset. You can give it any name that you want. I gave it the name Corona. And now I need to count all those dead viruses. Every input type radio that is in status of checked, I'm using the property of counter increment, and I'm using the same Corona value that I created here. And now I need to summarize the total score to the screen. In order to it to work correctly, the place that you are summarize the score in the HTML document need to be after all the input type radio that you have in your own HTML document. The easiest place is just to put it in the bottom. Div class sum, the text score is coming from the HTML, and I want to print here after the total score. To do that, I'm selecting the class of sum, using the after pseudo element, using the content property, and I'm now using the native CSS counter function, and inside I'm just printing the Corona value that I incremented here and created here. And in this way, it's always listening and printing the total score to the screen. Because it's a very complicated example, I want to show it in a real demo code. Let's see it in a live code. As you can see here, I created kind of 5 coronavirus creatures. This is their label. You can even see the input radio inside. In the real game, it has opacity of 0. And the place of the summarize the total score is in the bottom, div class sum. The text score is coming from the HTML. The numbers are coming from the CSS. To declare a CSS counter, I'm just declaring it on the body HTML element, counter reset, and I gave it the name Corona. For every input type radio, if you are in the status of checked, counter increment needs the Corona value that we declared on the body HTML element. Beside of it, if the input type radio is in status of checked, go to the sibling element with the class of body and give it opacity of 0. Remember, this is a label HTML element, but all the visual part are here. And if this input type radio will be checked, all the visual part of the virus that are here will be disappear, will get opacity of 0. And to summarize the total score, I'm just selecting the class sum with the after pseudo element, with the content property. I want to print the total score to here. And I'm just using the native CSS counter function. And I'm just putting here the corona value that we incremented here and created here. Yes? Let's see that it really works. I'm clicking, and you can even see the radio buttons are being checked, and the score is going up. And with this thing, you can create a pure CSS score for a pure CSS game. Really amazing and important trick to create pure CSS game. But now, let's continue to another amazing trick. How can I create pure CSS countdown? This is really funny to see. As you can see in the HTML, you don't see any numbers. The numbers that you are seeing here are not coming from the HTML, they are coming from the CSS. And to do that, I'm doing animation on the before and pseudo element of this pen HTML element, this pen with the class of count, that you will understand that this one number is not one number. There are two separated strings. They don't have any connection between them. They are just very synchronized. Let me print the text AA inside, and you will see where are you having the numbers. The first number is the before pseudo element. The second number is the after pseudo element. And how it really works. I have here a special animation that is going between 9 to 0. Total of 10 frames, you see? And I'm doing animation on the before pseudo element first. This is the first number. How I'm doing it? I'm going to the before pseudo element, and I'm calling the animation of countdown, and I'm telling it to work for 100 seconds and 1 iteration. 100 seconds, remember 10 frames, meaning that every 10 seconds it will go one number down. 20, another one. This is the first value. 30, another one. And when it will finish the only one iteration that it has, I want it to stack on the last frame of the animation. To do that, I'm just putting here the special forward keyword value that telling the animation, when you are finished, please be stuck on the last frame of the animation. Now, to do the second value, I'm calling the same animation, but in a different way. I'm telling it now to work for 10 seconds and 10 iterations. 10 seconds, 10 frames, it means that every 1 second it will go one number down. 2 seconds, another one. 3 seconds, another one. And when it will finish the first iteration, because I declared 10 iteration, it will do it again for another 9 iteration. And when it will finish all the 10 iteration, I want it to stack again on the 0 value. And again, I just put here the forward keyword value. And in this way, when the animation is finished, this both value will be stuck on the 0 value. You want to see that it's real? Let's see that it's working. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Nice. Whew, amazing one. Let's continue to another thing. Random values in CSS. First, I want to show you why I wanted to create random stuff in my own game. Let's play again the game. And what I wanted to create in this game, I wanted to create that the coronavirus have different location. Even the scale of them is being changed. Even the rotation of them is being changed. And what I'm doing animation for every one of the viruses. But wait a minute, how can I create random stuff in CSS? You can't, but you can do it with Sass. Because it's a very important example, I want first to show you this is in the real code. You need to understand that if every virus have 6 different locations in the game, it means that I needed to create animation for every one of the viruses. And again, because I didn't want to write those animations one by one, what I've done, you already know, I just created here. Let me show you this in the real code because this is a nice example. As you can see here, I created a for loop that is running 100 iterations. Let me do a little bit zoom out that it will be looking more nice. And this animation is created 100 times. It's inside the for loop that I show you here. And every one of the viruses have the same translate x in the axis. But in the translate y, I'm using here the Sass random function that randomizes me value between 1 to 80, and I'm just doubling it in 1VH. And in this way, in 6 points of the game, for every virus, I have different translate y-axis. Even for the rotation, And even for the scale, I'm using here the random function. That you will understand it even more better and you won't afraid to use this random function of Sass, let me show you another easier example to understand. Let's a little bit zoom it in. Let me show you the HTML that you won't be afraid from the pug. Very regular HTML, 6 empty li HTML element. The numbers that you are seeing inside are not coming from the HTML, as you can see. They are coming from the CSS code. And what I'm doing here in the Sass code, I'm creating here a for loop, that is running 6 iterations, creating me dynamically all the CSS selector between class 1 to class 6, as you can see here. And in the before pseudo element, I'm using on the content property the Sass random function, just randomize me value between 1 to 80, and I'm just doubling it in 1 VH. And for you to believe me that those numbers are really randomized, let's do a small change in the code of Sass, and you will see that they are really changing. In order that they will change, you need to compile the Sass code again and again and again. Yes, it's not happening in the CSS part. Let's press enter, and you will see that the numbers are being changed. Another one, again, another one. As you can see, changing and changing. And that you will understand exactly what is happening in the CSS, because this is Sass, it's doing this. It's just a regular CSS, nothing special. Just a 6 selector. The numbers here need to create only when we are compiling the Sass code to CSS. If you will refresh the CSS, it will stack on the same numbers. It's very important to understand. Nice trick, and let's continue to another trick. In the end of the game, I'm putting the Gameover Curtain, and I wanted to create the effect that the player can play this game again and again and again. And I thought about a lot of ways of how to do it. And one thing that I understand, that in order that a player can play this game again and again, I need to reset all the checkboxes that I have in my game and all the radio buttons. All the radio buttons I need to reset that I can play the score and the score will not be in another number. And I need to reset all the checkboxes to bring the user back again to the game menu navigation. And how can I reset all the checkboxes and all the radio buttons? And this is one of the most oldest features that exist in HTML. This button of the back to main menu is not a label button now. Now it's an input with type of reset. And in order to it to work, the only thing that I needed to do is just to wrap everything with the form HTML element. And now when I'm clicking this button, it's automatically resetting all the checkboxes, all the radio buttons. This is bring us again to the game menu navigation. And now you can play this game again and again and again. And the last question that you need to ask me, how can I know exactly when to put this Gameover Curtain? I need to put it exactly after 99 seconds. And this is one of the most easiest tricks that I have in my game. Everyone know, let's just put it a little bit here that you will see it. Everyone know that animation can get animation duration. This is telling the animation how much time it needs to take from point A to point B. But what we sometimes forget, that we have the animation delay property. And in the real game, I just put it on the game curtain, animation delay of 99 seconds. And after 99 seconds, it shows up. And it's really easy. And if you want to see that it really works, here in this example, I only put 5 seconds. Let's see, refresh the screen, and we will count together between 1 to 5. Let's refresh the screen, and well, we'll do it again, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Game over. We saw here a lot of CSS tricks that with them you can create pure CSS game. And you maybe think that this is the main key takeaways that I want you to take from this talk. But it isn't. What I want you to take from this talk, you can create pure CSS game. But what I want you to create everything that you want to create in code. It can be any project. It can be with CSS, JavaScript, anything that you can think of. And why it's so important to create project only for fun? Because when we are creating projects for fun, we don't care if it's hard or not. We are enjoying it. It doesn't matter. It's a lot less frustrating. You are enjoying to create what you want to create. And in the end, it will make you a better web developer. And after that, you will get a better salary. And even this is not important. Because the most important thing in life, my friends, is to have fun. Create your own project, only fun, enjoy, because we only live once. And my friends, I am Elad Shechter. I'm a CSS HTML architect. I'm doing a lot of stuff on CSS. You can find them in those social networks. And if you want the slide, you have a QR code, and you can take it right now with your phone. And my friends, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Elad. On a quelques minutes pour des questions. Si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à lever la main. On passera le micro.
Sorry for my bad English. About the random part.
Yes.
If it wasn't in CodePen, the first coronavirus would, on every game, start at the same point?
Yes, totally. If I'm not compiling the Sass code, it means that they have the same locations all the time. But the most important thing is to create the effect that I'm not moving in the same line. Yes, totally. In order to change, you have to randomize the code again and again and again.
Thank you.
Welcome. Here.
Hello. Regarding the countdown of the game, I was wondering if it was possible as well to use a counter, CSS counter, and decrement it.
No, it's not working with the CSS counter. CSS counter needs to count something on the screen. It's because of that, it cannot do it. In the future, we are not there yet. With Houdini, you can do it with CSS native variables that will go from 99 to 1. You can say it, you can declare that the value is an integer and not a string, but it's still, we have a time until Houdini will be finished.
Thank you for your presentation over here on the. Yeah. I had one question. Since all coronavirus are radio input, how do you prevent people from making coronavirus leave again by clicking randomly on the empty part of the screen?
It's easy. You didn't think about why I used radio buttons and not checkboxes. Radio button, when I'm clicking on them, they are stuck. You cannot, if you will click it again, it will still be checked. It's not a checkbox, it's a radio button. And because of that, when you are clicking it one time, it's stuck on the check status. If you will click it again, it will don't do anything. This is the reason why I use their radio button and not checkboxes.
Hello. Yes, I'm here, just in front.
I will try to see. Here.
Yes, thank you for the talk. You didn't make a win screen, right?
Yes.
Was it too complicated to make?
To tell you the truth, it's not complicated at all. The only thing that you need to do, you can do it with for loop that is running, creating a CSS selector that checked if the status of check, plus checked, let's say 100 times. And then you can go to a sibling element and to print you won. You can do it. I didn't do it. I forgot about it. And there is something when you're creating project that you need to understand that you need to stop in one point. It's a fun project, and this is the reason why I not created it. But one thing that I added not so long ago was this back to main menu button. I wanted in the beginning to do it with a link that just bring me again the page. But because it was in CodePen, I don't know why it doesn't work. It's inside an iframe, I think. And then I remember the input type reset, and I started to say, oh, how I didn't thought about it. And this feature was added only a few months ago, I think. But you can do it. It's really possible and quite easy to do.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I was wondering, how do you deal with the overlapping of the corona? Because you set its opacity to 0, but the element is still there. So if you click on one, how do you know what will happen if you click randomly on the screen?
They are not overlapping because if we will look on the game again, let's take a look. Let's see, not here, here. There is a big screen. Let's refresh it. Let's say I'm clicking here. If you will take a look on the game, you will see there are no overlapping because every one of them is going in the same timeline. They're just moving all the time. And there is no overlapping if they are dead. They are with opacity of 0, and the next one cannot be really in the same time on the same location. But you can solve it even with, if you are creating, let's say, the check status, you can say, I think, I didn't write, but to change the Z index. But in this case, it won't happen. The only reason that I'm using here opacity and not display none is that I wanted to create the effect of the fade out. This is the main reason that I'm using here. Because if it display none, it will just vanish, and I didn't want it. I wanted the effect of the fade out. Yeah, I answered your question? Yeah? Okay.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I had just a non-technical question. How long roughly did it take you to code this?
2 days in the weekend. It was
a productive weekend.
Yeah, I don't remember if this was from 9 in the morning until 8, 9 in the first day, and after that, I think 9 until 6 in the evening. And there were some bugs that I wanted to solve in Android. I don't know why, because there are too many animation. First, to do it that it will work good in most of the devices, I used here mainly the transform to animate stuff, as you saw. But still, there was a problem in Android device. I don't know why. And I created this feature of high performance and low performance. And what that it does, it's remove the animations. If I will click it, it's just going to the sibling element and telling them animation on. And as you can see now, the virus is stuck. The hairs are not moving. The eyes are not moving. If we will take a look again on the game, you will see eyes not moving and the hairs not moving. In this way, it was good even for Android devices.
Merci beaucoup, Elad.
Thank you very much.